Hi, it's Steve at Center City Hypnosis. This clip is about sharing a couple useful tools that can help make it easier for you to find some direction in your life. Now, we don't like to complain about the economy, or at least I don't. I don't like to complain about the economy or blame outside factors for how things are going. But it's certainly the case that right now there's a lot of uncertainty out there. And, really, if you think about it, it may have always been the case that things were always uncertain, but maybe people were just fooled into thinking that there was certainty about things. But regardless, people, at least in my experience working with clients, they're still feeling a lot more uncertainty than before. And this can leave many people, naturally, understandably, feeling overwhelmed and kind of paralyzed and stuck because there's so many possibilities and so many unknowns about the future and even about the present circumstances. So here are a couple of different tools that that may help people figure things out. And they're very different, but in some sense kind of similar as well. Now, the first tool is known as a pendulum. Now, a pendulum is simply anything that's like a weighted weight that's on the end of a string that a person holds over some sort of circle or something that is calibrate they can calibrate to with yes or no or unknown or just any sort of way that they can kind of see whether or not there's some sort of answer depending on which way the pendulum swings. Now, there's nothing mystical about the pendulum, unless you want to believe that's the case. But there's really nothing mystical about the pendulum. So our hero here, Agent Dana Scully, would approve. Because the way the pendulum really works is that having this sort of weighted thing at the end of a long string, especially if it's well balanced, what it does is it can amplify any sort of like muscular movements, unconscious, subconscious muscular movements within the arm and hand. Kind of acts as a lever, sort of, so that any sort of unconscious physical movements are kind of very easily seen and recognized, so it can swing one way or go around in circles, that sort of thing. So if you Google the search term using a pendulum, you'll see a lot of search results that offer different techniques and more detailed instructions on how to use this sort of thing. And some of them do take the approach that it is sort of like a mystical sort of thing. That's perfectly fine. If that helps you, figure things out and, come up with different answers that are useful to you, that's perfectly fine. But it's important also to understand this can be used by people who don't have that sort of belief system. And so Scully here would give it the stamp of approval, I think. But anyway, and I use this sort of tool myself when I decided to start the hypnosis practice, just to figure out if it was something I really wanted to do and how I would feel about that sort of thing. Now, this is not the same thing as basing decisions on irrational emotions. It's more about not using your intuition, kind of your gut feelings, and using essentially all of your nervous system to kind of see things more clearly and to kind of amplify things. In fact, using the pendulum should not be done when someone is in a negative or fearful or desperate emotional state. That's kind of a generally bad idea. Actually, any sort of decision making, of course, is generally, it's not good to do that when people are highly emotionally aroused. So this is just one of those tools. The second tool is a lot different, but it is also meant to help people kind of figure things out and kind of see things more objectively. This is what's known as, it's just a sample example I made up of a decision matrix. And once again, if you Google search term decision matrix, you'll find lots of different templates, examples of how to use it. Now, you may be familiar with this sort of tool for making decisions. Depending on your line of work, you may have used this kind of thing during projects or things like that. And it's always interested me that many people are familiar with these sort of tools to manage projects and to make decisions like project plans, Gantt charts, decision trees and things like that. But many times people, for some reason, don't realize that they could use those same tools when they want some sort of personal change, or they don't think in terms of personal projects. And I think one reason for that is because If someone is working on a project at work, typically it's not a person is not greatly personally emotionally invested in it. It's just something they do at work, and hey, they want to do a good job, but that's great. So, but I think it can be useful to kind of apply the same tools that some people use at work to personal projects. So getting back to this idea of decision matrix. Decision tree is a bit different. But a decision matrix, basically, you can create like a little spreadsheet or even do it by hand, where on one column you have the different choices that are available to you, different possibilities. And the human mind is really not designed to be able to do a lot of computations, a lot of complex calculations, at least normal human brains. So that's why if people try to just keep all these different possibilities in their head, it naturally feels overwhelming, because the human brain just is not designed to do that. So just to activate writing these sort of things down can make it less overwhelming. So here we have different possibilities, and here we have the different factors that would influence a decision or a choice. Like for example, here we have the different weight that a person personally would put on these different factors. Like for example, for some people, having a high income may be very important to them, and some people maybe not. So depending on that, it would be a high number or low number. Some people, it's more important for them to feel personally satisfied, for them to have less stress in their lives, that kind of thing, or just to feel satisfied with what they do for a living. So that would be, once again, high or low depending on that. And some people have greater or lesser need, greater or lesser tolerance for stability, security, certainty, that sort of thing. So here, once again, it's here. So the way this works is that with each of these different options, what you do is you kind of assign a different number depending on, let's say, this certain option here. It's a high income, or maybe if you become a monk, you can take a vow of poverty essentially. And let's say, for example, if you stay at your job and it's a miserable, toxic environment, perhaps, and it's causing all sorts of health problems and relationship problems, family things, just because it's. You would assign a low number here, and different numbers depending on how satisfying these different factors are, and so on and so on. Now, something like stability is kind of sort of a guess, of course, in some sense, but you can kind of determine at least a relative scale about how stable something is. So then the final score is calculated here by basically taking the factor weight and multiplying it with this number that you assign here for this option, multiplying that and across these different columns. Then you add up the different sums so that you get the final score. Now, of course, these final scores are if two scores are kind of similar, then I don't know how much significant difference that is, but this can give people a pretty good idea of what the worst option is, or maybe on the other end, what their most preferred choice would be, depending on these different factors. So this is how this can be also useful, and I've used this sort of tool myself when thinking about different directions to take, because then it can at least, at the very least, reduce or cut out some existing choices that, when you look at it objectively in this sense, you realize, oh yeah, I just don't want that, or that sort of thing. So that can make things clear, hopefully. So once again, if you search on Google for something like this decision matrix, there's a lot of templates and examples of how to do this sort of thing. So the reason I think both these kinds of tools can help people is, even with the kind of the thing like using the pendulum, as I mentioned, it's really about intuition, and the decision matrix is really about just objective kind of numbers. They can both be helpful because what that does, it kind of takes like negative, emotional, fearful things or desperate emotional states out of the picture. That way people are able to think more clearly, hopefully. And that's why we have this picture of a very logical person here. Of course, this logical person is half human, so no one's perfect. But so the reason that hypnosis can help people with decision making and finding some direction in their life, hypnosis cannot give someone a direction in their life, But what it can do is it can help people figure things out on their own. And it can do that by reducing the effects or the influence of negative emotions, or even the influence of negative aspects of a person's history or their environment, so that they can focus more clearly and see things more clearly. And when people use these sorts of tools, and then I believe that can make them actually more confident and feel more secure about what direction they eventually want to take. And this can help them kind of get out of any sort of rut or any sort of what's paralysis of being overwhelmed and kind of uncertain. So anyway, I hope these kinds of two tools were kind of interest, and yeah, I suggest you look them up once again. One being this idea of using a pendulum, and the other idea of using a decision matrix. Two things that can, really kind of help people make decisions a lot easier, I think. Anyway, once again, it's Steve at Center City Hypnosis, and I hope this was useful to you. All right, thanks.